that there's definitely value in all different sectors of education. But that's how I kind of stepped in, and then from there I kind of got involved in the sales and the marketing and admissions and financial aid, and really just kind of educated myself of what it may take. And over a period of time, became a campus director and
Sure.
president and regional, and now have been with Charter College for the last 17 years, and in my current role as a CEO for almost the last 9 years. So it's been a fun ride. Enjoyed it. I thoroughly enjoyed just the aspect of training, teaching, and putting students to work, and seeing kind of that life changing aspect that education can do for anyone, and then particularly the opportunity that we have to work directly in the workforce development and meeting those needs and gaps. So that's a little bit about who I am and what I've done, but I've really kind of felt like I've had an opportunity to kind of fit into each little element, from an instructor to admissions, financial aid, that kind of side that all plays into the student experience as they matriculate through our systems.
Sure, sure. Now, did you go to school for higher ed, or what did you major in initially?
Yeah, my undergraduate's in psychology, and then
Yep.
my graduate degree is in instructional technology.
Got
So
you.
a little bit. I mean, it was the design and delivery of instruction, different system tools to do so. So it kind of was a natural element. And then as a side note, I guess I was always involved in sales as I went through school, even though my schooling is more the learning behaviors that come involved in there. But I put myself through school selling door to door pest control and services. So I mean that's kind of hardcore sales in of itself, to knock doors and to have that communication piece. But I mean I guess I don't know. I think I married those two well together in terms of how you can teach, train, and develop folks at the same time understanding the human behavior and performance that it takes to, share and teach and market something that has value.
Yeah. If you had to, if you had to pinpoint when you fell in love with higher ed, when was it?
Oh God, that's I think when in my undergraduate in terms of psychology, I mean that has a lot of different avenues you can go through, and from your counseling to clinical, and I really like the learning aspect of the mind and just understanding the human performance and the what the mind can do. And I think I've always enjoyed, whether that's in education, whether that's in other disciplines of arts and talents, is to see what the human body can do in conjunction with that aspect of, I would say, control, but the understanding the mechanisms and principles that have a large influence in the outcomes in one's life. So that's where I knew that I was more towards the learning aspect in psychology versus a clinical um, component to that, more the cognitive side. I really like the behavioral outcome that comes from that learning style.
Absolutely. So, since COVID, I would argue that higher ed is going through a myriad of changes, right? I guess how do you see, you know, how that trend is kind of flowing? Are you also seeing that it's changing rapidly? Like one of the questions we used to ask is where you see higher ed in the next 5, 10 years. But now, with how rapidly everything is changing, now we're like, well, where do you see it in the next 1, 2, maybe 3 years max, right?
Sure. No, I think, well, I guess if we can say, what is a positive thing I think has come out of COVID? Obviously, that was, a lot of different perspectives there. But as it relates directly to education, uh, prior to that, I would have had the frame mind of education's old school. It's hard to break down old norms. It is kind of like, I'm sure back in the day when they wanted to break away from the chalkboard and chalk, it was always, screaming and yelling as you deal with educators sometimes. I don't know that they would always be the most innovative individuals. It was always like, hey, this always worked. We're going to keep doing it. That's, the methodology. COVID, I think, opened the eyes to folks of different mechanisms of learning, uh, abilities to teach, train, and disseminate information. I think as I came from an instructional design background, I don't know that I was as adverse as maybe others, because that was in our educational, theory of how do you explore different, you know, modalities, tools, whether that's the internet, things of that nature. Back when I was going through that, I think University of Phoenix was making a real big splash in the educational market of online education. And I'm sure of those who are familiar with that, there was a lot that was adverse to that. If you can't learn that way, that's watered down. It's not true education. If you got your degree here, it was as less than in terms of the learning mechanism. So I think within COVID, from a broader education through K, because it affected everyone, K-12, K through 12 to higher education. It wasn't sometimes, and I think too in education, post education, universities work. They were known as the research, but K through 12, you didn't mess with. I mean, it was only one way to do it, and I think they saw that ability in the human capacity to learn in that. So, to me, that was a plus, and we've been able to expand on that, explore on that, even within our, the hiring practices, the training practices, those things, and you have industry more acceptant of that. Like, oh, so they got their degree online, as that isn't a less than or, and I think too in the technical side, we really saw the advantage of or the loss of those jobs, and really it elevated or opened the eyes of folks like, hey, these trades, they do have value. I mean, they are the kind of the bread and butter, the workforce, the muscle behind what kind of keeps our engine in terms of a nation going. And it's as simple as, you know, I would hate to say, but I think then a truck driver was like, that's less than. This is something you do if you can't do something else. Like I don't. This really is a skill set. They need training. And it's vital to keeping our economy going in a lot of ways. And so I think you saw that from the trades, the healthcare, other elements, so that it elevated the value of those types of professions and saw them in a different light during the COVID era, and has continued. And so I think that's been very helpful for folks to. There's a variety. I mean, and not that a university setting isn't a bad track and still can be a very viable, important, but it's not all or nothing. I think as I went to high school and others like, hey, you don't go to a four university, you're less than, or we're going to go put you over here. But still, even then, it was like, even you got to go to a community college. And it's like, you know, I think those they just open up other options, so that one isn't right or wrong. It's just there's differences now, and so now that we're having that conversation, we're going down those roads.
No, absolutely. And one of the topics we've been covering a lot on the podcast in the last few weeks is I did an interview with a Dr. Irma Becerra. She's president at Marymount College, and she was noticing the trend that kind of since COVID, it's almost like education has had to start to prove its value to the student or to the consumer, right? A huge shift. And, she's a staunch believer in education, and so am I. And one of her quotes was, well, if education isn't for everybody, can you tell me who doesn't need education? And I was like, you know, great quote. But it's like when you kind of continue along that path, you start to realize exactly what you talked about in terms of the trades becoming almost more valuable now, or at least the value being recognized because of the immediacy of maybe shortness of training. And then here's exactly what, you're going to do once you finish. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah, I agree with that, and that doctor's assessment that I think for a longest time, and I do agree that education is for everyone. Now, there's a different path.
Yep.
And what I like with, I think COVID and other has opened up that there is more than one, two set paths, but we're trying to hopefully break down the walls of that, cookie cutter model that so often higher education kind of says this is the way and the only way, and stamp it. So for sure, and I think that that also has put some ownership on the institutions to say, hey, here's the value I bring. Don't just because I'm in an educational group doesn't, I don't automatically receive value, if that makes sense. I mean, it's like, what are your outcomes? Let's really focus on what is the outcome of the educational institution, and bringing some level of responsibility and accountability to that higher educational institution to show that. And I think the consumer, I don't want to say he's getting more educated. There's just more knowledge available to them. It can, you know, our social platforms, our the internet has been there, but it's really growing, and I think uh, providing the consumer a lot more options and education and points of interest to look at to see what is the ultimate outcome they're looking for.
Absolutely. So, how do you feel overall about the direction of higher ed? Do you think that higher ed is moving in the right direction? Do you feel like there's a lot of kind of work to be done, a lot of obstacles to climb?
Yeah, I'm an optimistic person, so I would like to say yes, it's going in the right direction. I'm hoping that as educators and those of like-minded individuals are always looking to question, grow, and establish something, above and beyond of what we are. I mean, I think to me, the pitch I have to my folks is, we've always got to be working as an individual to better ourselves, whether that's, on an educational level, a personal level, spiritual level, emotional level, because if not, aren't isn't that what we are innately trying to do to our students? And if you're not doing and engage that in yourself, how can you effectively do that as an instructor, teacher to elevate their game? So I think in nature, we education has those types of folks. Um, I always want to say we have hurdles because I think there's others that you can, unfortunately, to make this move for us is money. And I think if anything, if you want to follow the money, where's it go? And so because we are, many of us are, contingent on the resources available to our students in higher education, Title IV. There's some obviously, and I agree, we got to follow some rules and regulations. But again, there's sometimes politicians and others that may not have a full understanding of that scope, and therefore put some stipulations on educational institutions that I don't know they're the most progressive, innovative things to do. Nonetheless, I mean, I think they come from a good position, but again, it doesn't serve everyone in the best regard. And so, do I think? Yeah, we definitely have some hurdles as it relates to learning outcomes, return on investment, if you want to look at it that way, in terms of the government investing in students. But I like that the conversation is there, and I do think that I'm a strong advocate of you know outcome generated. Um, I the regulations, but things that we look at. So a student can truly say, "Hey, if I choose to enter X program, these are the outcomes I expect." I mean, that's natural learning. We've done that from day one. When you have a class, here's the objectives, here's what you're going to learn, and when you're finished, you ought to be able to do X, Y, and Z. Well, I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, "Hey, if you're going to enter into a program, here's what you're going to learn, here's the outcomes," and there can be some estimated earning potential that you can have once you leave, so that one can see, hey, when I leave, I'll be expected to do A, B, and C under this environment, and naturally the workforce shows me that I should be paid within this spectrum based on what I can do. um, and I think that's a fantastic thing to be doing because that's just the nature of who I like. I mean, I'm not saying that learning philosophy or world history isn't bad, but on a return on investment, it's not there. I mean, there's just few and far between. And so I think a student needs to know that if they consume that or choose to buy it, they need to know what the true outcome is going to be versus getting that lumped into the whole education is great. Go get it. And if you get a 4 year degree, you're going to have a wonderful life. Well, yes, but it depends on what you choose. I mean, a 4 year degree doesn't naturally guarantee it, nor does a 2 year associate's degree. It doesn't, or 2 year, does that make sense? And so that's where I see the
Absolutely.
progression going, and needing to continue to have those hard conversations that that's the direction, and be full disclosure of what one is going to get from their chosen path of education.
Absolutely. So let's transition a little bit to the hot topic, right? AI in higher ed, right? I'd love to know kind of how do you think about it? And, is it something that you're nervous about, excited about? And then, when you think about it, is it more operationally? Or is it more academically? I know that's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, so I'll try to touch on those. I guess from my position, I'm super excited about it. I think that as an educator at heart, there's pros and cons to everything, but I think in general, I'm here to embrace it. I mean, how can it enhance, my students, my employees to to enhance their learning, enhance their productivity. I mean, you look back over the scope of time, there's always been new tools, that may have beginning of resistance, but I think it's something that we have attempted to embrace it in our school. Now, yes, I mean you want to be at the cutting edge of technology, but maybe not bleeding where it's hurting or harming you. I mean, I think there's a balance there, and I think there's an appropriate time in different sectors of when it gets integrated. And so, as the educational sector that I run and manage, I think that it has proven itself to begin to find ways that we can integrate it so that it can enhance our employees and our students' experience. Uh, but also, there's a fine balance of, I'm still an advocate of the personal relationship and personal touch, but where we have seen and begun to look at how we can explore in our institutions is what kind of tasks, resources can we provide through AI and an agent that can give our students quicker answers, more efficient answers, that type of component, um, even from the learning environment. How can it enhance, an instructor's ability to teach, train in a classroom? And so there's very, I guess, general, we're still very exploratory in this point, and there's a lot of people to market trying to say pitch or to share that their tool is the way to go. And I think like anything, you've got to be able to shop around, find what works best for your institution or your place of business, and then to monitor that. I mean, that's not any different than I'm going to go hire a new employee because I started a new position. You know, you got to hire the right, find that, define that, and see if that individual meets that need. But I think moving forward, I think it can do some fantastic opportunities for us and our learners to have knowledge at their fingertips and also be a great coaching, a very consistent coaching. That's what I've seen, at least for mine, is how do I bring the consistency into, questions of enrollment, questions of financial aid, questions of, add drop. I mean, just some very things that are very, I'm going to say rote, but also I want at a high level of proficiency. I don't, where sometimes as a human agent, if I look at an AI agent versus a human agent, my human agent sometimes gets a little creative in their explanation of what a drop is or how to add a class, where to me that's black and white. I mean, we don't need somebody's opinion. I'm like, this is how you add, this is how you drop. Here's what, here's the, grading policy. Here's where the syllabus says, doesn't say, here's when your assignments are due. And I get it real time, and there's a real high level of accuracy that I can get there that, in the past, sometimes in human behavior, it's not there. So I hope that kind of answers your question. We can dive in, I guess, maybe unpack one specifically of kind of some experience. But I would say us as an institution, we're still at the very beginning stages of implementing that into our system.
Yeah, no, no, it's great insight. So I'm curious when you talk to kind of your colleagues, what would you say people are most afraid about when it comes to AI in higher ed?
I guess I want to be cliche, but I think like anyone is like, oh, it's going to take away my job. Um, some jobs, yeah, they will. And I've been very upfront and transparent. They will. I don't know what that is. Um, that's not the objective. So I think the greatest fear is my job's going away. Um, Another one I hear in education, it's going to create students, you know, they're going to cheat. AI is going to write their paper for them. And so it's reframing that of, okay, how can we create an environment that still elicits the outcome that we need? And so, I use this in trades or I use this in the medical field is, could it help them write a paper? Sure. But how can then we test or elicit the outcome, the behavior that we know is the employable behavior, and that there's proficiency there? And it's also instead of saying that the tool about AI is going to water down or um, cheat the system is, when they leave the workforce, they're going to use it. So how do we teach them to use the tool? I mean, how can they use AI to go out and get information and equip them with what they, know? So to me, it's changed a little bit of the frame mind of like, instead of also losing my job, it's like, how can it enhance it? How can I have more personal contacts now? Because I'm not running reports. I'm not, doing things that truly an AI agent can do for me. And if we
Absolutely.
set it up, it can do that so that the human touch, the human contact can increase. So it's shifting their focus. I think as leaders, you got to go in again. Each tool is different for each individual. But once you make that selection, it's like, okay, how is it that we can enhance other elements that we otherwise weren't able to do prior to AI? And so again, it's it's a it's a mindset. It's framing that. It's also setting a strategic plan of where we want to go as an organization and showing that to individuals. In my case, the instructors, the employees, um, has been the direction we've chosen to go, and I think
Absolutely.
can be an important principle that was probably very similar when we rolled out other changes in education. Clear back if you go to the internet, or you think of any new innovation or technologies, that adaptation process is that principle has been the same whether you're adopting from an overhead projector to the internet to now an AI agent. It's okay. How do we frame folks? They see the value add, particularly as it can implement them in the workforce as it relates to many of our students and instructors.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, a lot of times it's, when you think about, higher ed academics, you don't want to get left behind, right? Like, you think about it with calculators and mathematics, right? You get to a point where that's all you're using is calculators and computers. Well, to your point, there's going to be a time in the future as we continue to go further and further forward, people are going to be using AI for everything. So, why not, higher ed be the institutions where they're getting that education, they're getting that experience, instead of it being something that, we're afraid of or we're the last to, kind of adopt. So, and then your other point I think is huge because we're big advocates of this, of taking away the monotonous task and really giving instructors and faculty the opportunity to focus on that voice to voice kind of high touch support that students need in order to be successful. So I think you're definitely walking down the right aisle on that. um where do you see higher ed, kind of combining with, job futures and AI in the future?
Mhm. Well, I hope to see it again, a community embrace the tool of because it's the outcome. I'm always about outcomes, and to use maybe something because AI is a little bit newer. Maybe we're still learning of what that outcome could be in the workforce. But let's use your example of calculator because I think it's a perfect example. You could have been in high school and no calculators on
Right,
tests.
right.
And to me, if you're an accountant, when you get out in the workforce, you got a calculator right there in your desk because of the proficiency, the quickness, and they see the value of that. But in the educational institution, we're beating the student down to don't you dare use that calculator.
Right.
But again, to me, that's we miss the opportunity to why don't you teach them to use a tool? Because when he or she goes out to the job interviews, how quick can they use that calculator? Do they know all the different tools? And it's like two Excel spreadsheets, and how do you run those? It's back in the day, they did them on the ledger charts. I mean, it's embracing the tool. And so to me, I want to teach my students how to use the tool so that when they enter into the workforce, and whether that's in HVAC or welding, which may not be there, but there's going to be components that they can use to enhance their skill set. And that's what I want. I'm hoping, and I see it going there. But if they don't, at least in the field that I operate in, I want to elevate my students to be that much more attractive to the consumer, which is the job market, to hire them because they can use that tool that's being put into business that again that allows them that efficiencies. Um, so I see it going there. Do I see that there's potentially going to be opposition? Sure, in but I don't know truly because I get the opportunity, at least in my role, to bring it into my organization. And I think it starts from the top down. And so if I wasn't, then yeah, we would be an institution that's fighting it, be rejecting it or finding ways. But I think that you're a little. I believe you'd be short sighted not to try to find some value in from a, you can come at it from a very optimistic yet cautious, element to, not accept everything that's given to you because like anything, there's good and bad. And I think that they're still learning and growing and you got to be careful that you just don't take it at complete face value. But ultimately, it's about our relationships. And to me, it's what is our relationship with that tool, how it can help us relationship with the student, and ultimately, again, putting them to work and have the necessary skill set. So I don't know if I truly answered that question, but I guess I'm hopeful that, but I'm also realistic. There's going to be some level that say absolutely not, rejection, not going to
Sure.
take it, and be able to produce the research that tells you how horrible it's going to be and how it's going to, water down, ruin, distract the true learning. But I think, again, you look where we've been for the last 10, 15, 20, 30 years. There's always innovation. And you know what?
Absolutely.
Business who are training people to go to work to make a dollar, follow the money, you've got to adhere to what they want. And business is telling us this is what they want and they're going to be using. So why would I shortchange my learners the opportunity to know and be able to operate and function effectively in that environment?
Absolutely. So we recorded a podcast probably maybe 6 or 7 weeks ago now. Did you go to CQ?
I did, yes.
Okay. All right. Were you aware? Did you take part in the AI task force guide sessions?
I did attend that tight their session on AI, the task force that was assembled through CQ in their presentation there, and then had since read their I don't say pretty lengthy, but decent PDF file that kind of shares with our sector, our population, our group of what became of that task force.
Absolutely. Yeah, we recorded an episode with some of the people that were responsible for, kind of putting that together and especially the guide. And one of the questions I asked, I said, well, you know, I'm in the stock, so a lot of times, when you're talking about artificial intelligence or electric vehicles, or Nvidia with the chips, somebody will say, well, what inning is this in, right? Is it in the first inning, second inning, right? Is this party almost over and we're in the eighth inning? So I asked that question to them in terms of what inning are we in regards to AI and higher ed, and I think it was Sean. I think he said, Kamar, we haven't left the locker room yet.
Hmm.
And I was like, wow, really? I'm just curious. Would you agree with him? Do you think we're further along than that?
Come on, I guess I take the sense I don't know what I don't know. I mean,
Okay.
and so it really, from my standpoint, I don't know. I mean, obviously, I wasn't part of that task force. I think when in
Yep.
the type of that, they're looking at all different angles.
Sure.
Um, I at this point, I'm a consumer sitting on kind of a grocery store, shoving like, okay, I can see all the different types of cereals or all the different type of AI products. Which one's going to work for me? So I'm reading the ingredients box. I'm looking at what they do. I'm looking at what kind of you know the elements of kind of like anything. What are they saying they can or can't do, and kind of testing it out. Um, Taste testing. So if I was to answer that question, I don't know if I put it in like a maybe an inning section or maybe being a depth baseball fan, but
Right.
I'm in the taste testing standpoint. I think there's a lot of varieties out there. I'm reading the ingredients. I'm looking at what kind of databases they access, kind of what's the protocols of what they use and how they do it. What's the security of there? I'm obviously from student data. I'm looking what does that open me up to?
Sure.
In terms of the regulatory world, if I do bring an agent in for a marketing, you obviously I've got to be responsible for what they do or don't say. So I'm in the taste testing standpoint. I don't know if I'm picking a flavor, going, hey, that's my cereal of choice. That's going to give me the best health outcomes and meet my nutritional needs. And here's how often I'm going to eat that bowl of cereal. I mean, maybe that's a bad analogy for me, but that makes more sense in my mind of like, okay, I think it's been proven. We know that it's been approved to be out on the shelf. There's a couple of different varieties.
Yep.
We're taking a look at that now, and we're really trying to, I guess, do some preliminary testing, of what we may want to saddle up with and hitch our wagons to, like, is going to give us what we want.
No, that's a great answer. If I kept it with baseball, I would say you're scouting. Uh,
Yeah, scout the talent. I mean, it's out there. How am I going to assemble my team? So, maybe I'm even not even in the locker room yet. At least for me, I mean, Now, AI may be ready there. I, as an institution, can say, "Hey, I'm scouting the talent. I know. I think I know what I want on my team. I know what my current team is. What kind of new talent can I bring part of that team to that will feather in well and take us to where I believe we need to be going the next, 6, 12, 18 months."
Absolutely. No, no, I think you said it perfectly because that answer is more, I think, and then you broke it down. It is twofold: is where is the technology, but then where you and campus and higher education leaders, where are you guys? Could actually be two different places. So I think that's a very fair breakdown. So lastly, because I know you're a super busy man, um, what you talked about earlier, kind of how you fell in love with higher ed. I'm curious, what keeps you in love with higher ed? Like, why do you stay?
People. It's just it's the people you work with, it's the students. It feeds, I guess, my intrinsic nature of who I am. Of how do we better ourselves? And I think in an education is an environment that allows you to be an environment to continually growing, learning, and expanding. I mean, I have also said that one of my criticism is of education is sometimes we're so stifled. It's like we find something that works and we don't ever want to let go of
Sure.
it. And that there's can be some value too, because I think sometimes you can jump ship too quick. Like, hey, why are we deviating from the principles of like 2 plus 2 is 2? I mean, we do know some proven factors, but what I I'm a component of in education is you can stay with the principles of effective learning, and then you layer on tools that can enhance, but you still use those principles, but in a new innovative way. And I think AI is there. I mean, we saw that with, calculators or, you know, smart boards or phones. I mean, how do you use that tool to still integrate the tools? And I think that maybe that comes from just from psychology and my background of instructional technology. I mean, times are going to change, and in 50 years, I don't know where we're going to be, Kamar. But I mean, I'm sure there's going to be new things that can help that learning. But I do think the principles of learning can stay consistent, yet you can layer on elements there. So that's exciting to me. I mean, it's new, it's fun, it's you get to see the learner embrace that. And the other thing I love is these new generations. They teach me things. I mean, I'm still learning things. They still bring things to my attention, and they open a different perspective and a viewpoint of what that can be for us in these environments. So to that nature, I don't see myself going anywhere else because I guess one thing I've been doing for 20 years. I like it, and I think that I'm still learning. And so when I stop and get stagnant or don't like it, I need to step away. I think any educator needs to step away because I don't know that you want to be stifling the young minds, generations to continue to learn, grow, and expand of what based on true, proven learning principles.
Absolutely. Well, listen, I can't think of a better place to end it than right there, Josh. Um, One of the great things, as I continue to get to know you, you're a passionate leader, you're a humble leader, and I'm pretty sure that came across to our audience. So once again, thanks for joining. Do you have a Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn where our audience can contact you if they need to?
I don't. Well, I do have LinkedIn. I do have LinkedIn. So I mean, they could reach out that way if there's a questions or things. I like to kind of keep things relevant there. I think I post on a pretty regular basis of just what's going on. I like to showcase what's going on in our institution and highlight our folks that are there. So, but I do have one thing. As I also have my guest, I have a question for you. I mean, in my position, what kind of what lessons learned have you learned as you've talked with a variety of different educators and in the educational field? Um, what advice would you have for myself as a CEO of a college, career college of 12, that, kind of a principle based, feedback that you could give to myself and that I could take into my organization to enhance or encourage them in what we're continue to do on a daily basis?
Oh, that's a great question. That's a great question. I think to keep it simple is right. Keep the main thing, which is focusing on the students, but also your staff. I think it's a book, Raving Fans. The more you can instill that positive, supportive, servant leadership energy towards your staff, that's how they're going to treat the students. Um, I think you got to keep that first. That's what we notice in terms of success. And then, of course, outside of that, embrace technology. You got to embrace it because it's a great kind of conduit and tool to allow you to do exactly that by focusing and being positive with your staff and kind of paying attention to their needs
Hmm.
so that you can take things off of their plate so that they can help service your students even more and more and more because attention is kind of the new currency right now. And even though this environment and this society seems fast,
Hmm.
people appreciate when you can spend time with them and you can support them.
Okay. Well, thank you. Appreciate that. So,
Absolutely. Well, I've taken up enough of your time today, Josh. But you enjoy the weekend, my
hey, you
friend. And
likewise.
good luck with the ultrathon and I'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Thank you very much. We'll see you.